My new best friend in the whole world, Kenneth Davis, Big Ten country, joins us here. Kenneth, last week was, I don't want to call it like a shake-up week in the Big Ten because Oregon, Ohio State, like that was a 1-point game. It was like if I had written the story of the game I exactly wanted in that, it was pretty much that. Like a game that came down to the literal last second of the game, 1 point, like just that was beautiful as far as watching and enjoying football. It wasn't the most beautiful game by any stretch of the imagination, but as far as excitement goes, it hasn't really put Ohio State behind any kind of 8-ball, but did it reveal anything to you about Ohio State that maybe surprised you?
No, it didn't. It kind of, in a way, one, they're still a really good team. And like you said, they're not behind the 8-ball. But I think the fear with someone that watches Ohio State and occasionally roots for them is sometimes, and I think I've mentioned it on here, and it wasn't indicative of last week, but it's always the fear of Ryan Day not just taking advantage of the weapons that he does have on that offense, particularly. I think that's one of the things, but I think also I'd be disrespecting Oregon to give them the props. I was here last week talking about I still don't know if they're the national champion that we expected entering the Big Ten this year. And it's one of those slow burns, basically, where they're there. But as far as Ohio State, I mean, Ohio State can still get into the playoffs and win a national title, but there's still the fear when it comes down to coaching at critical moments with Ohio State. If Ryan Day can get that done, we're talking about not just the playoffs, but winning national championships. And that fear is still there. But I can't put it and throw it because you're still talking about, like you said, 1 point. They scored over 30 points. So at one point, I can't really just be like, this is a Ryan Day thing. But that's always my fear looking at traditionally a traditional Big Ten school in Ohio State that has had the most talent over the last 15 years and had the biggest bites at the apple when it comes to winning national championships since the playoffs has begun.
He's 2-6 against the top 5. I mean, like that's the thing that is going to any other program in the country outside of like the 3 others that are like theirs would say, sure, like the fact that we're a top 5 team playing a top 5 team would be enough for us. Like, you know, we'll take those 2 and hopefully rally. The problem is that 3 of those 6 are against Michigan, which is like a double, you know, X in the, like you missed the question on the test twice. Like this answer was so bad, I'm taking off 10 more points. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, but you know, look, if you asked Florida right now, would you take Ryan Day if he got you to the playoff and every year you traded off losing to, say, Georgia or FSU? They'd be like, I mean, that's what we have done in the best years of our program anyway. So, yeah, we'll like, does he want to come here? We'll clean up for him. Like, don't worry about that. But there's, I would say it's a minority, but it's a vocal minority of Ohio State fans who are just going to hold that over his head until what he holds over his head is that national championship trophy.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, and one of the things that I always say when it comes to the Big Ten, particularly Ohio State fans, is one, say it with your chest out. Like, you can't be the biggest and baddest boys in the Big Ten and then be meek. And okay, I'll give you Michigan the last 2 years because Jim Harbaugh had them primed. Yes, to your point, it's a double loss because it's your arch rival, so it stings. But you know I'm an Alabama fan, right? And I know it may come off as arrogance, but Alabama had won so much that losing the national title didn't bother me as much. You know, I'm like it. So for me, I get if I'm an Ohio State fan where Michigan becoming really good again, it would pester me. But in my mind, in the back of my mind, I would still kind of wonder, is it sustainable for Michigan to be that good? Because Jim Harbaugh only did it in the last few years of his tenure there. It wasn't like this 9 years that he was there, that they were a national title contender all of those years. It was at a point where it seemed like they were going to be, and I'm referring to the University of Michigan, were going to be idiots and run him off thinking that they could get something better than Jim Harbaugh. So if I'm an Ohio State fan, a part of me would be like, yeah, I'm mad you lost to Michigan, but it was time. Maybe they just had our number. I think the big thing still is, you're not winning titles and you're not in national championship games. And that's where when you look at what Urban Meyer, how he had built that program up, bringing it to where Tressel took it to one point, then Urban Meyer took it to a national super team, basically, where the type of recruits he was bringing in. That's where that my ire would be, because Ohio State has one of the best recruiting programs in the country, but you're still not seeing it on the field. And that's, to me, where you're right. Yeah, a Florida should feel like that, but this is Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't have to settle. I think it's a thing like this. I'm not saying that recruits will go down in Ohio State, and I have another point to this. But do you want to mess around and wait and see because he's not necessarily getting it done? But also the flip side is this, and this is what I try to think about what I'm going to come on when we're going to have talk. I look forward to our Fridays. One of the things for me and my arrogance has been not properly paying attention to the parity within college football, because let's go back to Alabama. I've been spoiled by Alabama, and I like seeing superpowers where they're still superpowers, but they're not as strong as what they used to be. And that, if I was an Ohio State fan, I would start to have fear, because the schism that was once between you and these B schools, it's a lot closer now, and you have someone that's viewed as an offensive-minded head coach. Again, they put up over 30 points, but still you're viewed as one of the better schools, and you're not getting it done now. And as parity continues through the transfer portal and through NIL, how is that going to affect you moving forward as far as winning it all? Okay, now you have the 12-team playoff, so it gives you more opportunities, but still, at some point, you have to look Ryan Day in his face and say, this is not enough for the Buckeye Nation. If it was me, as far as being an alum or someone that just has an extreme affinity for the University of Ohio.
All right,
Ohio State.
As a, they would love it if there was no University of Ohio, because then they wouldn't have to say the all that time.
Right.
But I've wondered this for quite a while. Kyle McCord lost a game as the starter last year, and they pushed him out, but also they changed offensive coordinators. You see Kyle McCord playing in a system with Fran Brown at Syracuse that he's doing really well in. He's the fifth best passer in the country this year, and he does not have the talent. I mean, granted, he's got a couple dudes. Aronda Gadsden he's that guy at tight end. He's got a couple dudes around him, but he doesn't have what he had at Ohio State. And so I think and I'm not knocking Will Howard, but Will Howard in these moments, we saw him at Kansas State, he had the great one against TCU, but then against Texas last year, it was very similar in that, he kind of locked up a little bit. Is Kyle McCord, was it fair to push Kyle McCord out the door when you also decided to bring in eventually Chip Kelly? At first it was Bill O'Brien, when, he lost one game. You're setting an impossible standard for Will Howard the next year. And he already is a guy who I think is a good quarterback, but we've seen him clinch up in big moments before.
I think it's a bird in your hand type of situation.
Okay.
Where you knew what you had. I think this is the thing. And I have to look at Syracuse and who Syracuse is also playing compared to being within the Big Ten. But the weapons that Kyle McCord had around him at Ohio State, and I'll put it like this. I don't know where Kyle McCord begins and Ryan Day ends as far as the play calling while he was the starter under center. But there were times where you felt like Kyle McCord couldn't take advantage of all the weapons that they had at Ohio State. And I think that was the fear. I mean, clearly they thought he was good enough because he was the starter. Now you could say it's burning them, but they're putting up points. But as you said, that Will Howard locked up, and Will Howard is going through, perhaps it could just be who he is, but he's going through growing pains. So I'm not mad that they didn't hold on to McCord, because I think a lot of us thought that they needed to move off of him. Does it look bad? Yes, it looks bad, but I understand the reasoning behind it. So I can't sit here as someone who last year was like, why isn't Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka, why aren't they taking advantage, Stover, why aren't they taking advantage of all these weapons that they have on the outside? And why does it look like when McCord there, he's being more of a game manager than taking advantage of all these weapons? And again, sometimes I place that on Ryan Day. And now because he's doing well at Syracuse, say, well, Ryan Day, you're stupid for getting rid of him. That wouldn't be fair for me. I won't do that because I was down with the move. The move may have come back to bite them in the butt, but I was down with it. And I wouldn't be being honest if I came on here and lied to you and was like, yeah, they're dumb for doing it, because it was something that I probably would have done myself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, in this spring, he's going to have a battle between 2 5-stars for who the next quarterback is. So,
right.
I mean, if you want to lose those guys, for sure, fire him. Like, that's the other thing I would say to Ohio State. Like, you know, this is all new, especially with the 12-team playoff. But I get the frustration. Now to Oregon, the team that won that game. Mm-hmm. Do you, first of all, do you believe that Dan Lanning intentionally did the 12th man on the field thing, or that when people started saying that's a brilliant move, he'd be stupid not to go, oh yeah, no, I totally planned it out?
James Naveau, running with me during Big Ten country, we're texting, and as soon as it happens, he said, I think he did that on purpose. And that was the first time I heard someone say, I think he did it on purpose. I wish he hadn't said it. I wish he just would have played it off, even though I'm sure they would have made an addendum to the rule. I think perhaps he did, to be honest with you. I know, of course, it sounds good and everyone wants to prove that they're genius, but I think he did. I think that smart coaches do things like that. And again, he could be lying, and, he could have just pulled the wool over my eyes, but you're supposed to make up situations like that to burn time off the clock and use the rules against the rules. So I think he did it on purpose. What do you say?
I think he did too. I mean, like, and here's the thing: the NCAA moved faster on this because they, like, again, than they have on anything in their history, because it is like a potential crisis point, because this is not like, that was not like a clever thing. Now that other coaches who may have never thought about that in a million years knew that was out there, like, why wouldn't I just put 17 guys on the field? Like, have all kind of chaos, and, you like, I'll have all kind of chaos. If I knock the pass down, the Hail Mary that might have made it with 13 guys on the field, and you have to do it again with my 11. I mean, why not? Like,
and you ran time off the clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. I wonder, I think my question would be to Dan Lanning, did you know that, or who told you that? Because that's a coach that we need to be watching moving forward in the future, who knows the rules well enough to be like, hey, coach, you know what? If we do this, or I was working at this place and we had this idea, but that was a smart stuff like that. You have to love in sports when someone knows the rules well enough to take advantage of them when they're on defense to hurt the offense in the manner that they did versus Ohio State last weekend.
Yeah, that's why I'm always fascinated when an offense, like on, say, like 4th and 6 from the 50, wants to, like, take a delay so they can have more room to punt, and the other team takes it. I'm like, no. They're worried that their guy's going to punt it out the back of the end zone. Just decline it. Like, just say no.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yes.
No, we're happy with a touchback. I won't even send anybody back if it, like, if you don't think your guy can coffin corner it, go ahead. So
I'm with you. I hate sometimes where people stick to what their tradition is when you knew there may be an advantage if you buck their tradition in that type of manner. It's like, no, don't have a fear about it. Like you say, put it on the field. Let's find out what can happen. I hate sometimes that people stick to tradition when there's other avenues that you could take advantage of to win the game.
Which is why I love Dan Lanning. He's well on his way to being, to me, America's coach, where everybody's gonna be like, that guy's fun. Like, he's just and after that game, he looked like, I said on the air, he looked like he had, like, a lion that just, like, killed the wildebeest, like, where he was just like, like, that was huge. That was huge.
He should have. I mean, again, I don't know what's gonna happen at the University of Alabama, but and I'm not trying to diss Kellen DeBoer, but it may have been nice if Dan Lanning had decided perhaps to pick up and move his stuff down to Alabama, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Garrett's laughing. At the LSU fans laughing.
Hell yeah, I
am. We'll see. We'll see.
All right. The best game in the Big Ten this week between Big Ten teams is Nebraska and Indiana. I think Nebraska should be ranked. I absolutely think they should be ranked. I think it's bogus that they're not. They have a very close loss to Illinois, who's a really good team. And for whatever reason, like, it's part of the SEC bubble that they don't want to let some teams fall out, right? So they leave them there. But Indiana's the biggest surprise in the whole country, not named Army and Navy, and maybe even still the biggest surprise, because they're not only winning, like, they're scoring points. They're fun. Like, this isn't like a weird thing. Like, Kurt Cignetti's brought his style. Curtis Rourke's playing really well. This is legit. Nebraska and Indiana, one of the best games in the entire country that's not named Texas and Georgia. And I feel like it's going to fall to the wayside because we have Texas and Georgia. But let's talk about this one, because this is a doozy here.
Yes. Listen, man, I don't want to hate on the Hoosiers. And this goes back to something that you asked me, I believe, last week, and it was about how many victories could Indiana have. And now this is really the first game where it's kind of like, okay, now Nebraska isn't all the way back just yet, but it has one of the stingiest defenses in college football, right? And I think all of us are still waiting. I think we all know that Dylan Raiola is nice, but he's still a young quarterback. So it's not like he's putting up swashbuckling numbers, but he can get it done. And he has innate ability that's like, oh, I see why he is compared to Baby Goat, also known as Patrick Mahomes. But the thing being is, when you just think about the amount of points and the fact that they've been putting up 40 on basically everybody, even though, I mean, Maryland isn't anybody this year. Like, if we're being honest, I think they're 3-3. And that was really the school has kind of been like, okay, that's a middling Big Ten power. But now looking at Northwestern smashing Maryland last weekend, like, it's okay. Maryland's kind of going through it. They're maybe next year they'll be better. I'm not gonna go with Nebraska. I thought about this long and hard before I came on here, right? Because in my heart of heart, I want to choose Nebraska, right? But then it's like, man, Kurt Cignetti is doing something crazy. When you think about all the transfers that have come into that school this year, and how quickly that he's forged that team together. You mentioned Curtis Rourke has thrown for like 14 TDs and a couple interceptions. I mean, this is going to be the first sellout that they've had at that field. They're bowl eligible, and look at where we're at in the season. You got to give them props. Matt Rule said, and I think he's right, that they probably would be in the top 10 if they hadn't started outside of the top 25, that they're a top 10 school as of right now. And I say it as a knock, they haven't played anybody, but they have. You have to see when they go up against teams that we think are formidable, and this is the beginning of it. They're going to have more schools that they have to play that are even more formidable when you're talking about Washington after Nebraska. Michigan State, they're going to drum Michigan State. Michigan will be interesting, but Ohio State will really be the one. But, I mean, when you look at it, it wouldn't be crazy if they only lost two games, 2-1 game out of that upcoming schedule, because how they're playing right now, it wouldn't shock me if they beat Michigan. I'm not saying they're going to beat Michigan. I think Michigan still has enough horses, even though they're not putting the ball in the air, to get it done with the ground and pound and what they do within the trenches. But it wouldn't be shocking if Indiana could put up enough points that Michigan can't catch up because they can't do anything through the sky. Man, it's crazy. This will be the game to me where, honestly, I shouldn't say that. That's going to decide how I feel about Indiana, because they can lose this game and still be a really good team moving forward. But it's at least against a school and a team and a program that's that upward trajectory of Matt Rule in Nebraska, to where it can kind of let us know and give us a baseline test of what Indiana really is against I won't say a power, but a school that's becoming a power again in Nebraska. I was shocked. I shouldn't be shocked because of what Indiana's been doing, but I think the spread is like 6.5 or something. And that, to me, is like, against that defense over Nebraska, is like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But you have to give Indiana its props for what it's accomplished so far this season. But to your point, Nebraska lost one game at home to a team that has been doing everything possible in Illinois to get where it's gotten, and it still ranks. Nebraska shouldn't get a ding. It should get dinged if Illinois fell on its face, the last couple of games after beating Nebraska. And even though Illinois had a close game last weekend, it still shouldn't have hamstrung Nebraska where they shouldn't be in the top 25 because people, it's kind of on the flip side of like Indiana. People didn't expect Illinois to have the type of season that they're having so far this season. So you shouldn't punish Nebraska because of that. You should actually reward Nebraska because they lost to Illinois in a close game. And Illinois has been performing and has been in the top 25 for like the last four weeks.
Yeah. The game, look, part of it is the game is changing and not everybody, like you have slow realizations as to this is what things are now. And some of the slowest realizations are coming from the AP voters, like and the coaches. Like bottom line, those are the people who are voting. Yeah. I think this is all going to be different 5 years from now. We're going to look at it very different because we'll have a large sample size. But Kenneth, and just last thing here, this is where we're going to be. Like you're going to still see the powers be the powers, but I don't think you're going to see 10-year dynasties anymore. I don't think you're going to see maybe even 5-year dynasties. You're going to have dips. It's going to look like the NFL where you have a team that's in the Super Bowl one year, and I'll just use my Florida State Seminoles as the example, 13-0 last year, and then this year they're struggling. Next year they might be good again. We don't know. But look, if you told me that next year Ohio State was going to be 8-4, I'd be like, well, there are circumstances that would allow to that, right? Where, you can drop off. It's harder, but I would believe it more than I would just 2 years ago.
Can I be the old curmudgeon and say, get off of my lawn?
Yeah, sure.
Everything, what you're saying is exactly how I feel. But then the thing is, and I like how you just pointed out, we have to get a larger sample size. But then for me, it takes away from what I feel like I'm supposed to quasi know, because it's like, look, Penn State always is not questionable on the road. You know what I'm saying? Like that's always a question. Yeah. And Drew Allard threw hella interceptions last weekend. But still you look at what is SC? Like, yeah, SC ran up. We were questioning SC's offensive line versus Michigan, and they ran a ball down the Penn State's throats, Tom Allen's defense throats last week. And it's like, wait, hold on. I can't get a proper read on all of that. And that's to where I'm an old curmudgeon, because like you said, it's going to take time to understand parity and how it's going to affect these teams there was a large schism between them and other universities where it is shorter. I will say this: if Ohio State is 8-4 next year, I'm going to be upset as somebody that's a proponent of the Big Ten. But your point is valid. It can definitely happen. And part of me, and I guess I shouldn't be like that, because I did get to experience what Alabama did. It'd be different if I never experienced it. I was rewarded with a great experience by Nick Saban and the young man and the whole staff that put that together. That we probably won't see again, and it'll probably be the windows will probably be a class, depending on it'll let us know. Some coach, you know what? I'll say this, Paul. Some coach will figure it out, though. Yeah. Some coach will be good enough to where he will have his classes rolling in and have the transfer portal to accent what he needs, to where his team is in the top 5, or just the playoffs in general, but he's consistently giving his team a chance at the dance. But we just kind of got to find out. And it may be guys that we already have talked about today. It could be Dan Lanning. It could be Kirby. It could be Sarkisian. It could be, but it's also going to be some guys that we're not talking about that are going to know how to do and what they need to do to keep the young man engaged and at their programs over the long haul, but also are smart enough to benefit from NIL and the transfer portal to really even kick it up another notch. But it's the Wild West. And I don't mean it in a negative sense, because a lot of people make it seem like it's a bad thing. To me, anything that helps the students get more is great. It may not be, I may not like it. I may get tired of, wait, what school was he at last year? Yeah, but so what if I'm insignificant when it comes to these young men's futures and what they can get accomplished, even if they don't make it to the pros, the type of money or just the experiences they can have. But again, for me, it's like, hold on, what is going on? But again, I'm an old man on the porch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kenneth, I'll sit on that porch with you any day, buddy. I will.
Hey, come on.
That's right. That's right. Kenneth Davis, Big Ten Country, one of my favorite guests we've ever had, and it's just getting bigger and better. I love it, Kenneth. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week, buddy.
See you next week. You guys have a great one.
All right. Kenneth Davis, Big Ten Country. This is 365 Sports.